What's going on, guys? Aaron from Top Tier Gaming here, and today I am bringing you an updated Marincess deck profile for the new format. And it's been a while since we've updated this deck, and this used to be pretty much Marincess Tier Gaming, where I constantly uploaded Marincess videos. But ever since our last national format with the introduction of Power of the Elements, I haven't been able to play this deck as much because it definitely took a dip as far as its role in the meta. I do think this deck is still very strong and has a lot of great options, and I'll sort of explain those as I go through the profile. Before we hop into the deck profile, I do want to let you guys know, Discord link down below, along with all of our other social media links. Also, I'm trying to hit 20,000 subscribers, so if you are a fan of this type of Yu-Gi-Oh content, you enjoy this profile, you like what you see here, feel free to like and subscribe. It really helps me out and what I do here on the channel to keep providing high-quality Yu-Gi-Oh content. Now, without further ado, let's hop into this Marincess deck profile. Alright, so before we get into the monster lineup, I want to talk about reasons to potentially play Marincess this format, because it definitely has pretty serious competition with Mathmech as the best Cyberse deck in the format. And I do think Marincess has some advantage over Mathmech. I mean, we're playing a bunch of level 4 water monsters, which I think the first thing you gravitate towards when you hear something like that is, of course, a card like Abyss Dweller, which is phenomenal in the current format with Tier Element being, the best deck. But with all the Cyberse decks, you're essentially playing one-card engines with a bunch of flexibility in your hand trap and flex spot lineup. Also noting that Darkwing Blast will be coming out in a little under a month. Mathmech take a huge hit from the Byssted archetype, so I do think Marincess is maybe a better investment than Mathmech going forward for those questioning on whether or not they want to build the deck. With all that being said, I want to get into our Marincess lineup. We are playing, of course, 3 Marincess Blue Tang, who is the best starter. I still think this is one of the best Cyberse starters in the game because she plays around hand traps by herself in a similar fashion to something like Circular does as well. Because you can send what you need to send and then link her off, and she has the ability to potentially grab additional Marincess cards that can help you keep extending or play past interruptions. So I've always really enjoyed Blue Tang. She's a phenomenal starter. Definitely one of the reasons to play this Cyberse deck over a lot of other ones. Next we are on 3 Spring Girl, which I think is also very standard. She's just a phenomenal extender because most Cyberse decks have a huge problem with their normal summon being interrupted, but Spring Girl allows you to play past that. We're definitely going to maximize her at 3 again because we're maximizing almost all of the level 4s. And to sort of go with that theme, I am still playing 3 Pascalis as I have done in the past. Now, Pascalis is really good because, again, an all-star of this format is Abyss Dweller, and she can help you get there by being level 4 and an extender. And she's also amazing follow-up in Graveyard. So I just want to maximize all the level 4s with 3 Pascalis, 3 Spring Girl, and of course the 3 Blue Tang. So we're maximizing all the good level 4 Marincess monsters. 3 Marincess Seahorse, and this is still one of your best starters because she is 1 card link 4 by herself. While being able to search the field spell. The only way to guarantee a link 4 and grab the field spell is to start with either Seahorse or Blue Tang. Now that's not always the most optimal route, so I wouldn't say Seahorse is the best starter, right? Because it's obviously Blue Tang, and then behind that you might even say it's Spring Girl because she's overall a better card and level 4. Seahorse being level 3 is a little bit awkward. However, I still think it's worth playing 3 of all of your really good Marincess monsters. So we're definitely still going to be playing 3 Seahorse and her beautiful Starlight Rare. I have considered dropping her to 2 in the past for additional flex spots, but I do think I just want to maximize on the good Marincess monsters. Lastly, we have 1 Sleepy Maiden, which is an integral part of your 1 card Blue Tang combo, so you can get Argonaut with a negate. She's also just a phenomenal extender and definitely worth the 1-of slot. Even though her being level 5 is a little bit awkward, she is perfectly fine to play at 1 because her Grave effect is very, very good. That's it for the Marincess monsters. It is 13. Going on into our Marincess engine spells and traps, we have the 1 Battle Ocean, which is very, very standard because you don't really want to draw this when it's so easily searchable. And then we have 2 Marincess Dive. You see some people on 3. I think 3 is a little much, especially when you need to fit so many good, defensive cards for the current format, that I think 2 Dive is pretty much the best ratio you can go with right now. Maybe in some formats where your engine can keep up with other engines, it's fine to play 3. Dive is such a powerful card, being either an emergency teleport or a monster reborn in so many different situations, and can really help this deck play again past your normal summon. So we are playing 1 Ocean and 2 Dive as our Marincess spell lineup. Then the last Marincess card in the deck is of course the Marincess Wave. This is essentially one of the reasons to play Marincess, is the fact that Wave is such a powerful card. I mean, this card truly was the reason to play it a couple months ago, and it still really is, because having all of your monsters become unaffected is such an insane like form of protection. It's really good with the way the deck plays, and you just want to be searching this off of your triangle to make sure you can protect your board, which makes your follow-up worth it, right? Like your follow-up does nothing if you get OTK'd, and this really does a lot to hinder your opponent being able to push past your board and OTK you. So this is a very phenomenal card. You definitely want to play it at 1. 3, Signet Mining. I think this is a pretty obvious card to play. In a Cyberse deck, you want to search, additional copies of Blue Tang or find Spring Girl, like your extenders. So definitely something to play at 3. 2, Pot of Desires. This is a card like I've gone back and forth on, but I think in all of my recent builds I've been on Desires. Like, yeah, it's not great if you banish your Battle Ocean or your Wave. You really don't want those getting banished. But especially in a format where the Marincess engine is definitely looking power crept by other decks in the format. I mean, you take a look at Tearlaments, they're absolutely bonkers. Mathmech is arguably the better Cyberse deck besides a couple of things Marincess can do. I think Desires is needed for the extra power. Like, you don't want to banish your Wave most importantly. So a lot of times if you can like search your Wave and then activate Desires, it's really good, but I think it's still worth the risk because drawing into like maybe an extra DD Crow or like a Nibiru or some insane hand trap that can maybe stop the Tearlament board is very good. So I think 2 Desires is something I definitely am enjoying right now. 1, Called by the Grave, very standard. This is just one of the best cards in the game, especially right now with Tearlaments being just like as good as they are. This is very good versus that deck, and of course stopping hand traps. You definitely should be playing the 1 Called by the Grave. Lastly, for spells, I'm choosing to play 2 flex spots here that I'm sort of still like considering their position in the deck. I'm on 2 Cosmic Cyclone. Now, Cosmic Cyclone I actually think is not a bad card this format. Like, it's tough because obviously Spell Canceller and Eradicator are in the format somewhat, at least as far as we think right now, and spells they're hindered by that. However, this is like still okay versus Eradicator because you can chain it and maybe hit the opposing Solyek. This is like pretty good versus a couple of powerful decks in the meta, particularly Runic and Runic variants. Cosmic is one of the best ways to out the field spell, which is why I'm playing it over a card like Signet Crosswipe. There's also the Rika deck that is a decently popular deck, and the field spell is pretty much their main source of power, so getting rid of that is great. Then you have things like Drytron, where this card isn't actually that terrible, especially if they're on a card like Mystic Mine, which I think is, still a card I want an out for in my deck. So even though like people might not play it because of Spell Canceller and Eradicator, I feel like having an out is still very good. But it also hits like the Drytron Ritual spell, which is nice. It's overall pretty decent versus everything, and then really good against decks like Runic and Rika. So I'm entertaining playing 2 of this. However, you could definitely like take 1 out for potentially another hand trap or something else you might want to play, but I'm currently on 2 Cosmic. All right, now for the go second cards, the defensive cards, the hand traps, whatever you want to play in this role. This is sort of what makes Marincess so adaptable to every format, right? You're just playing a solid engine that replaces itself and puts up interruptions. And then your defensive cards and the just sheer amount you can play is what makes them adaptable to any format. So starting off, we have the 3 Ash Blossom, which is, I think, pretty standard. Like, there are some questions whether Ash is like high impact enough in the current format, but she can stop the Curious Send, which I think is like one of her best roles against Tier Elements. Stopping Curious is very important. It can hit a couple of things in the Tier Element deck, but mostly for decks like Fluandereeze, Exo Sister. This is like a pretty good card versus a lot of the more fair decks. Like, everything but Tearlament gets hit by Ash pretty hard, so I'm definitely pretty confident playing Ash Blossom, even if she's not super amazing in the Tearlament matchup. 3 Ghost Bell. Now, this is something I really like in this deck right now. DD Crow is a super popular card, and this can help you play around DD Crow, but obviously this card is fantastic against Tier Elements, where you can hit, the Grave effects, and this card is very good versus Mathmech, being able to hit Super Factorial as well. So not only is this a really good, aggressive card against the best decks in the meta, like something like Tier Element, and this can also stop Elf and Sprite. So, this also stops the Runic field spell, so it hits a lot of really popular decks. However, like I said previously, DD Crow is really popular in the meta, and that can really interrupt some of your Marincess combos. So this is also a great defensive card to stop your opponents Called by the Graves and DD Crows, which is why I really like maximizing Bell and Marincess. To sort of combo with our Bells, we have the 3 DD Crow, which again, as mentioned, is very popular in this format because obviously this card is very good versus Tier Elements. It's very good versus Mathmech, it's good versus Rika, it's just good versus so much right now. Its only downside is the fact that it's very bad versus both Fluanderies and Exosister, where you will definitely side this card out, but I think it's definitely worth maining 3. So we're maining a lot of hate in the form of the 3 Crows and 3 Bells for tier elements, and I think that's very warranted because it is probably the strongest deck in the current metagame. 3 Impermed, I mean, this card is really great as a hand trap right now. I'm playing it over Effect Veiler, even though Bubble Reef can like draw additional cards on your opponent's turn and like draw a Veiler and then it's a hand trap. Imperm is just really good because it can be a great 6th card, which I like. And also it is a trap, so it can't be called by the grave or they can't tactics, things like that. Being able to hit like Kalos with this or Curious with this is very good. And also tier limits are going for Appaloosa more often, which makes a card like Imperm additionally like more beneficial than a card like Effect Veiler. So we're playing 3 Imperm. Lastly, we are on 3 Nibiru the Primal Being, which I think this is just a very powerful hand trap. When paired with other hand traps, it hits a lot of things in the current meta, and I think it's definitely worth playing 3. So there's a couple of different things you can do with this hand trap lineup. You could choose to play droplets instead of some of the hand traps or just really powerful cards. But again, because Spell Canceller and Eradicator are in the room, I've opted to go with like 15 hand traps as my defensive cards. All right, on to the extra deck, which has actually changed a little because the meta, I think, kind of calls for it, and I'll sort of explain those changes. Starting off, I'm playing the 2 Blue Slug, which is very standard across all of my lists, and I think standard for Marincess overall. 1 Sea Angel, this is something I've actually cut down. It's something I really liked playing 2 of in the past, and I have played 1 before, and in past metas I decided to bump it up to 2. I feel like because of certain things I want to play in my extra deck, I actually have to drop this card back down. If you feel like you can fit 2 of this, then I recommend it, but I don't think in my current build it's worth playing a 2nd Sea Angel over a different card. Then I have 2 Coral Anemone, which is of course one of the main combo points for Marincess. The 1 Coral Triangle to search the wave, and of course be a soul charge. This card is absolutely bonkers. The 1 Marbled Rock, which is still a very powerful card and you should definitely play. Then for the Link 4s, we have the 1 Bubble Reef and the 1 Argonaut. So of course these cards are something you're going to play because they are the Marincess boss monsters. I will note in Darkwing Blast, we finally get Zelantis, which is a very powerful card. And I don't know how I'm going to fit it quite yet, but it is going to be an additional rank 4 that we can use, which is quite interesting for Marincess going forward. 1 Splash Mage, which you unfortunately have to play in case you open just Seahorse, because you need the Splash Mage for your like Battle Ocean Link 4, and that the only way to actually get there is to go Splash Mage, which means you do have to run this card. He's a fine extender. Locking in a Cyberse is kind of weird sometimes, but I think he's definitely worth playing still. And the 1 Area, who's actually like pretty good this format because there's like a bunch of Rhino Hearts you could take and then make like a Marincess Marbled Rock. And then you can like also take opposing Totally Awesomes, even though that's less relevant now. There's just more waters in the format than normal, so I think Area got a little better. And can also turn your like Nibiru token into this and things like that. It's also an out to Ibly technically, which is pretty cool. Now for Xyz, we have the 1 Bahamut Shark and the 1 Toad. This is still just a great package for going first, especially going into like game 2s and 3s where your opponent will have blowout cards for you. So definitely still going to play this package. Although I don't think it's like always the package you're going to be going for anymore, because the thing I've decided to add, I think a lot of people expect in a format like this, is of course Abyss Dweller. This card is definitely one of the highest impact extra deck monsters in the current format, because this card does so much versus the meta, particularly against tier elements. Like this card isn't going to be great versus Mathmech, or I mean it's like okay versus that deck, but not crazy. It's not going to be that great versus Rika. It's not going to be that great versus Flunder or Exosister. This is specifically for the powerhouse in the room tier elements, and this card can shut them down very, very easily. And of course, because you're always going to have waters under it, your monsters will be pretty big. Like this will be a 2200 attack Abyss Dweller, and all your other monsters will be gaining 500 attack as well. So this deck having access to this card, it is like so easily, is one of the reasons I think it's actually a really like decent pick this format, despite it not being that popular. So I am running the 1 Abyss Dweller. Then lastly, we still have the Stealth Kraken. Like technically this could be the 2nd Sea Angel. However, I really like Kraken not only for like game 3 situations when, you just need to be able to inflict some life point damage, but also as a way to clear massive boards, and more importantly, be able to get rid of your opponent's strong boards, because a lot of the times, Marincess actually don't have like access code OTKing potential, and they need to like whittle down your opponent's board, and Kraken is a very good way to sort of break it, and that's why I've decided to play the Stealth Kraken over Sea Angel, but technically this is like what I would consider the flex spot in the extra deck right now. Alright, that's going to do it for this deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know down below in the comments what you think of Marincess right now. I'll sort of summarize my thoughts of like its position in the current meta. Again, I think Mathmech has sort of, primed itself to be the best Cyberse deck in our current format for the last couple of months, which is why you may have seen this deck fall off a little bit. However, I do think going into Darkwing Blast, Marincess might come back to the forefront as the premier Cyberse deck, with Mathmech just having such a bad time versus Byssted cards. And I still think Marincess is worth playing this format if you want to play it, because it is so adaptable with all the hand traps you get to play. Its engine is still really good. Like, being able to end on like Argonaut plus Dweller is not bad, or like Argonaut Toad still, however you want to do it. It's still like pretty strong in what the engine does, so you get engine plus a lot of really good hand traps and things like that. And, it's still a pretty powerful deck. So that's sort of my thoughts on Marincess. Let me know down below what you guys think, how you're playing it this format, if you are playing it. If you did like this video, please sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe. This has been Aaron from Top Tier Gaming. Bye, YouTube.